We'll start off with taking roll. So when I call your name, if you could call out present. Katie Bell.
Present.
Andrew Eloquin. Okay, we'll wait. He may be a late arrival. I am here. David Liu.
Present.
Tim Motley has an excused absence. Ryan Olson.
Here.
Brenda Spears.
Present.
Marlene.
Here.
Paul Adair.
Here.
Martha Ginthner.
I'm here.
And Mary Stevens also has an excused absence. So with that, with the folks there, and I guess online, we have a quorum, and we will have a couple decision items tonight. So that's important. Let's see. Next thing is approval of minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting? Anybody have any corrections or edits? You'll have to tell me if anybody is nodding or raising their hand because I can't see everybody.
Yeah.
All good?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Then with that, we'll approve last month's meeting minutes. And then now, do we have anybody for public comment?
Nobody.
No one in
Here.
person, and let me just check online real quick. I don't see anyone online for public comment either.
Okay. Rolling right through. Okay, then we'll move into regular business, and the first item is the urban forest management plan draft plan update, and that's presented by Dan Hintz. Take it away, Dan.
Thanks, Chris. It's Jeff at first for a quick intro. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. You, a couple of months ago, saw a first draft of this document and really appreciated you going through it with us, through your feedback from the environmental board, as well as community has really helped Dan and Chris to shape this up into what is really beginning to feel like a final document. So they're both here, Chris online, Dan here in person. If you recall, Dan is our urban forest supervisor. Hard to believe, but a little over a year now that Dan has been here, and just tremendous things happening. But on the work plan, completing this urban forest plan, our first urban forest plan, was a really, really high priority. You might have gotten the sense as you read through this, and also just a reminder, and as I think we discussed this tonight, you've seen a park system plan update now. You've really shepherded that through, and now here's a forest management plan right behind it. Just one clear difference between the two. The urban forest management plan probably feels a little denser because it's intended to be a little denser, a little more into the, I wouldn't say weeds, into the trees, into the branches. So just that context as we dig into this. But Dan, Chris, great work. Thank you. Take it away.
Thanks, Jeff, and Park Board, thanks for having me here again. As Jeff got hinted, we last chatted back in June, and at that point we had the current conditions section. Essentially, what do we have in terms of trees, urban forest programs at Issaquah, and that was our first set of bringing the kind of draft vision, the 5 guiding principles, and then the associated strategies, recommendations, and kind of sub goals with those 5 guiding principles. So hopefully you kind of remember back to that in June, and that was really kind of what started this, kind of actual tangible draft of our urban forest management plan. Chris will recap this a little bit, so hopefully not stealing his thunder too much, but we've been working on this for almost a year now. And really kind of, foundational pieces of an urban forestry program are obviously the city committing to bringing staff like myself, like our Green Issaquah volunteer coordinator on board. But really the other 2 critical pieces are having a forest management plan to really serve as a kind of guide or roadmap for the next 10 years as we build out this program. And then, the next big piece, which is talked about in this plan, and we hope to, pursue in the next year or two is a tree inventory. It's actually having a little bit, I should say a lot better idea of the, the composition of trees in our urban forest, really focusing on street trees and maintain parks and areas like that. So, like I said, the current conditions, the visions and recommendations is section 1 of this plan. So hopefully there's a little familiarity there from the last touch point we had with you all at the start of summer. What has been added since then that, is kind of called out in the email from Issaquah to review is the section 3, which is implementation and monitoring. So that is, actually, kind of starting to sequence, starting to prioritize, starting to look at kind of levels of funding, coordination across departments and within the community to achieve, that vision, those 5 guiding principles, and then the associated, goal strategies and recommendations. So tonight I can hand it over to Chris in just a minute here with Planet Geo, but we'll kind of go over a little recap on the timeline for the project. We'll talk about feedback we received on that first draft and that framework with those principles, goal strategies, recommendations. Focus in a little bit on the new sections with implementation, monitoring, and then talk about next steps. So I'll hand it off to Chris. We have, a specific slide at the beginning here and at the end is what we're actually asking for in terms of feedback and potentially recommendation to move this forward to council this fall for adoption. But Chris will kind of tee that up and lead the presentation here. So Chris, thanks for getting us started here.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And thanks, Jeff, as well. And good to see everyone. I did want to start off by saying I'm shaking a cold. So if my voice isn't fully back yet, so if I need to speak up, just please let me know. So I just wanted to also say, we last met in June and Jeff and Dan gave a recap of what we worked on and where we're at today. And just want to thank you all again for weighing in on the long-term framework, which allowed us to move forward with the implementation and monitoring section then of the plan, which we'll really highlight in this presentation. And so I just wanted to start off with a brief introduction again. Chris Pfeiffer, I'm the Director of Urban Forest Strategy at Planet Geo, going on 10 years coming in October. And I'm the project manager for this project. And the project is supported by Alex and Matt, who are both certified arborists experienced in policy, planning, and management of trees in the Pacific Northwest. And for our presentation, this is just an overview of what we'll discuss. But before I get into a project update and the draft plan itself, I'm going to turn it over to Dan again to share our requests for the board. And then we'll make sure to circle back to this request at the end of our presentation as we get into an open discussion. So I'll share this slide now and we'll talk through a little bit of the purpose and action requested here.
Hey, thanks, Chris. So kind of hinted at this already, but really, I know it's a big document. There's a lot of appendices. We're looking at kind of breaking that out. That's kind of a supporting document. So we weren't really expecting everyone to obviously read the whole 100+ pages of the main part of the plan. If you did, kudos, that's awesome. But what we're really kind of hoping for this round is, any comments and feedback on the responses we got to draft 1, which is summarized in a slide coming up here that we actually didn't attach. It's pretty far down on the agenda, but essentially a tracking document with a lot of feedback from some people on this park board, as Jeff mentioned, environmental board, other staff, and some other community partners, some Call Me Tribe as well. So that is synthesized at the end of the agenda. If you're looking for that, I think it starts around page 250. So we'll kind of review that here first, what's been addressed to date. And then, that really led that whole process, making sure that, we are on the same page about this framework, about those, goal strategies, recommendations that led to us being able to do this next iteration, which is the implementation, and then how do we actually monitor, and track success of the implementation of this plan, moving into next year and the subsequent years after that. So that's really the kind of purpose that we were kind of hoping any feedback, questions, clarification. Like I said, we're going to be going through some recaps of section 1 and 2, which you've already seen or heard about a little bit on current conditions and vision and recommendations. But assuming that is something you all are ready to do, we are looking for, a recommendation to move this forward to City Council for adoption. So what that would look like would be bringing this to the Safety Services and Parks Council Committee in the middle of October for their review. We met with them back in August as well, kind of go over that similar framework for the document, and then looking at a November whole council meeting for approval and adoption of the plan with delivery at that time from Planet Geo. So this slide will come back at the end of the presentation too. So we'll use this as a reference for our discussion here in just a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And then lastly, on the plan itself, I did want to also mention that the appendices are pretty lengthy. The idea there is to support the new urban forestry program as the implementation takes place over a 10-year period and as opportunities arise. For the final plan, we may decide that some of those are supporting separate studies, standalone documents. And so, there may be some shifts to that. And we did also want to note that the executive summary will serve as a standalone document so that it's going to be something that you all can reference without, combing through the entire plan. But there are going to be resources and information to support the urban forestry journey along the way. So a little bit of context there. And so what I'd like to do is just go through a brief update of where we started, where we're heading, and what our end goal is here. And so just to briefly recap the process and the timeline, beginning late last year, the baseline assessment was completed. And if you recall, we talked about a top-down canopy assessment. And that's just one component, and we'll highlight other aspects of the assessments. And then this assessment provided context to help us engage with city staff and the community, which began in 2024. Then in the second quarter of the year, the draft goals and strategies were developed after, we had a draft and met with you in June, and then revised and drafted the implementation and monitoring section. So here in September, we're gathering feedback on the second draft of the plan to make any final recommendations and revisions before we present the plan to City Council, with hopes and anticipation that the council will adopt the plan by the end of the year. And so the latest draft of this plan is a result of extensive presentations, meetings, and requests to gather feedback. And like Dan said, in the packet, there is a summary of some of the feedback we received and how we're addressing it, or what was completed. And so this slide here just shares some of the individuals and groups that were participating in the review and feedback. And this table paraphrases that feedback that we received and how it was addressed. And that edit tracking table is also a supporting document to make sure that we heard from all groups and that we're addressing and updating the plan accordingly, as it fits with the objectives of the management plan. And so we can go into more detail during our open discussion, but I just want to first thank all those that participated in the reviews. Not all projects get this much attention, and it really goes a long way to make this a plan, truly for Issaquah. And so a copy of the latest draft was provided as part of the meeting packet, but this slide will provide a high-level summary of some key components of the Section 1 current conditions. In the current conditions, we start off with tree-related assessments, and then in the plan, we describe the conditions of current management programs and the feedback we heard from city staff and interested parties. We also look at the current and potential risks and vulnerabilities facing Issaquah's trees, and the evaluation of all urban forestry components and how they align with industry standards and frameworks. So then diving a little deeper into current conditions, this slide will provide an example of tree-related assessment in the plan's current conditions section. And we utilized assessment data that was collected for the Green Issaquah 20-year implementation guide to gain insights into urban forest composition. And since the city currently doesn't have an inventory of public trees, those trees along streets and in maintained areas of parks, this data is a really great first step in understanding the citywide urban forest. And so we summarized the dominant overstory species, the understory species, as well as primary invasive species that was identified in those Green Issaquah surveys. And just one thing to note about this, and we go into more detail in the plan, based on this survey, we see that the forests appear relatively young. When you look at Douglas firs are more abundant compared to Western red cedars, and that hemlocks are not among the top 5 dominant overstory species. So even this data can start to bring insights into what the urban forest looks like and how to manage and grow it. And so then in the current conditions section, we also provide an example of how we evaluated current conditions against management programs and practices. And on this slide, the table on the left summarizes key planning documents that we examined, a brief purpose statement, how the plans align or do not align with urban forest management, key statements in those city planning documents relating to urban forestry, and any areas where potential conflicts exist or may arise, and how to address those in the management plan. This section also summarizes existing and potential tree pests and diseases of concern, and these have certain management implications. And on this slide, we just summarize Mediterranean oak borer as well as the emerald ash borer, which are concerns for communities as we look at urban trees as well as the rural areas and just the overall urban forest. And then this slide, going again in current condition, provides an example of how we examined the vulnerability of trees in the region as it relates to climate change. And we used a study from the Climate Change Response Framework's online tools and identified the common street trees in the Pacific Northwest that are the least vulnerable to increased heat projections. But as the disclaimer notes at the bottom, a public tree inventory would provide more specific considerations for tree species selection. And the city does emphasize planting natives and locally sourced seeds for improved climate resilience, among other beneficial impacts of doing so. So just a quick note on that. And lastly, for current conditions, we roll up all of our findings from the evaluations, the studies, the assessments into an evaluation based on the U.S. Forest Service's urban forest audit and the indicators of a sustainable urban forest. And we presented these findings during the June meeting together, but to recap, these findings supported the development of the plan's goals and strategies that we'll discuss in the following slides. And this framework also serves as a mechanism to monitor and adapt the plan over time. So in addition to the goals and strategies that are developed, the long-term framework consists of the vision, principles, priority actions, as well as appendices to support implementation that I'll cover in an upcoming slide. And as I mentioned, this entire framework provides the structure for measuring and monitoring plan implementation progress. And it serves as a foundation for adapting strategies over time and to make sure that this plan serves as a living roadmap and a work plan. And so we'll get into a little bit more detail of how that implementation and monitoring can take place. But before that, I'd like to just summarize the vision for the urban forest and the roadmap that is laid out in the management plan to achieve this. And so based on our planning results and feedback from staff and the community, the draft vision statement reads as, Issaquah envisions a thriving urban forest where a diverse and cared for tree canopy strengthens our community for generations to come. This verdant tapestry will enhance our livability, promote health and well-being, support wildlife and habitat, and contribute to a sustainable future for all. And just note that the draft was revised initially based on feedback we received, and it was developed with feedback gathered from city staff and through our engagement with interested parties. Then to direct the city towards this vision, guiding principles were drafted, and these principles were organized into themes that demonstrate the city's priorities, align with the urban forest audits I discussed, and they'll serve as a guiding compass as urban forest resources and conditions change over time, and city priorities may change, but these principles will guide implementation going forward. And so similar to the Issaquah Climate Action Plan, the ICAP, the Urban Forest Management Plan, or the UFMP, is a functional plan according to the city's planning framework, meaning over a 10-year period, the plan may inform other functional plans and the city's comprehensive plan. This 10-year roadmap in the UFMP should be reviewed and updated periodically and align with budget cycles. Essential to achieving the plan's vision is the implementation and monitoring framework. So we discuss what we have in the current conditions, and this is how to address the challenges and to meet the vision. And so you'll find in section 3 implementation that the goals and strategies are supported by priority actions, initial steps, targets, rankings, co-benefits of implementing that action, associated costs, and the key players involved. And the final plan will also include a separate interactive implementation worksheet to sort, filter, and track actions. Maybe there's an opportunity that arises and you can sort by the highest priority with the lowest level of effort required and look at the time frame for implementation to really find those actions that you can address immediately or in a longer term strategy. And so section 3 also includes cost estimates for priority actions, and an appendix details these costs for budget planning. Also, there's an appendix that includes potential mechanisms and sources to fund implementation. And I'll cover these in a little more detail later. But the next slide just gives you an example of a strategy table where additional information is provided to support this implementation. And so to demonstrate, this table details the steps, the targets, and timeframes for implementing strategies under goal B1, which aims to address public tree maintenance and risk management with a public tree inventory. And I do see that, I'm bringing up the inventory often. It's because it was identified as a high priority for the city. It can help to address priority maintenance and management decisions, planting, capacity and levels of service, tree canopy cover, vulnerabilities, and also inform future budget decisions. So it is one that we look to address more in this presentation this evening. And this table also outlines the priority level of effort required to implement along with those co-benefits. So those benefits of implementing beyond just helping the urban forest. Maybe it relates to community or human health or looking at other themes of supporting and to build support for implementing that action. And these actions also include cost indicators. And again, they can all be sorted in that interactive worksheet to really nail down a work plan for implementing the management plan. So then the strategies or actions that do have a direct cost associated with them include an indicator in the tables that I discussed on the previous slide. And these costs are then supported by an appendix that lays out potential funding mechanisms and sources such as the ones listed here. And just note that in the appendix, there's more information around these types of mechanisms and considerations and specific data relating to Issaquah. And so I also briefly mentioned the appendices of the plan to support implementation. And so this slide just summarizes the strategies and actions on the left that are supported by an appendix in the plan listed on the right. And the order, the appendix name may change a little bit, but this gives you an idea that beyond just saying you should do this, we're trying to lay out the steps and considerations, the costs, best practices, case studies, tools and resources out there to really help make this possible, because in every community we work with, resources are limiting. Time is always a factor. And so this will really help to nail down those priority actions and the first steps for implementation. So lastly, in order for the UFMP to be a living, working document, monitoring of the plan is critical. And this slide summarizes the key components of the monitoring section of the plan. It is recommended the city pursue an update to the urban forest audit and indicators, and we're planning to provide the city with training on how to do that. We'll be here along the way too after the project's done to help with utilizing these frameworks. But I think it really will serve as a consistent framework for monitoring over the years and adapting the plan. And we'll provide templates on those audits so that you can carry this forward among the tree team or the boards involved with monitoring the plan. We also look to provide guidance on those audit and indicators, and also ways in which you can monitor benchmark values that we established in the planning process. One metric is the percentage of tree canopy cover. It is recommended to do a follow-up canopy assessment. So one benchmark would be to see how that canopy has changed and what were the causes of canopy gains and losses, and how should you adapt the strategies accordingly. We also make recommendations on reporting progress internally and externally with interested parties, because they were all involved in this process, and we want this to be a shared vision with a city commitment to the plan. And so communication is key, and also gathering feedback to make revisions to the plan. The monitoring section also suggests the process for making revisions based on your evaluations, as well as based on the results of your monitoring, and as changes to resources occur over time. So that concludes the presentation. We started with our requests, which I'll share again on the following slide. We discussed the project timeline and process to prepare this latest draft. I covered highlights from the draft plan, specifically in the current conditions section, and then we looked at the frameworks and protocols for implementing and monitoring the plan. And following this meeting, we'll incorporate your feedback into a final draft. There's going to be additional styling and design applied to the plan. There's going to be looking at making it, like I said, the executive summary as a standalone document, and really just doing the final touches based on the feedback and discussions that we have. We'll then incorporate any additional feedback and meet with the Services, Safety, and Park City Council Subcommittee in October. And we anticipate adoption of the plan by City Council in November, so that the city is ready to implement the plan beginning in 2025. And so that's our plan, but we want to hear from you. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dan again to talk about the purpose and action requested of this meeting. And really just want to, again, thank you all for your time and weighing in on the draft plan, and looking forward to the open discussion here. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And again, so yeah, this is a slide we started off the presentation with. Kind of the focus again is on, any feedback, any questions you have on the feedback or comments that we've received as part of draft number 1, reviewing and providing feedback on the implementation and monitoring sections. If there's any other questions related to current conditions, obviously we can cover that too. But like I said, these are kind of the new pieces of information in additions to the forest management plan since we last met with you in June. And then once we're done with questions, discussion, anything there, we could make a draft motion to recommend moving this forward to council, or recommend moving it forward with, if there's any possible revisions, amendments that you're hoping to see as part of that process. So yeah, we'll leave that to Chris. Chris is the board chair, and the rest of you all to make that decision. But yeah, I guess for now, any questions for myself, Chris, possibly Jeff and Santi as well, but
Are you taking questions on like the updates to the plan broadly, or?
yes. So well, I guess what we could go through these, each of the purpose ones there if you want to, but it can also just be broadly related to the plan, current conditions, things that we did cover back in June, but certainly have kind of added to since then. So it can be all of that.
We've got a question from Ryan.
Hello, this is I tried to go through all the pages, and so maybe it's in there and I missed this, but if you go 2-ish slides back, you don't have to, but you had said, Chris, that there's a review period, and then there's a make a new 5 to 10 year action plan. Was the review period annually, or was it also 5 to 10 years to make a new 5 to 10 year plan after that?
Yeah, good question there. So one of the recommendations looks at canopy cover change. And so there would be supporting assessments and studies that would provide evaluations, but there's maybe a full revision at year 10. So there wouldn't be any major changes in the short term.
Okay.
If I could add, it's a really good question, Ryan. Just to add some context looking back. So the canopy cover assessment is something the city has done, at least in my time here, twice now, right? So I think that 5-year mark is more referenced, as Chris said, to a canopy cover assessment, which is just trying to confirm where we're at in terms of percent canopy cover. And I think we covered that in the June conversation. And then updating this type of document every 10 years.
And Ryan, I'll just add to, you know, we are looking at doing annual reports, just kind of on general progress. I think as Chris hinted, you know, probably a little bit more using the audit tool, you know, maybe every 2 years, especially if we're kind of looking at new budget cycles, kind of looking to accomplish what are those kind of next near term, you know, kind of 2-year goals. If you look at the implementation section, a lot of stuff is 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, and then, you know, maybe more long term in that 5 to 10 range. So they're kind of different intermediate. Yeah, there's kind of the general kind of annual accomplishments that we want to better kind of formalize and use this plan as really the framework for how we put those reports together. I think every 2 years, we're obviously looking at budget requests and, you know, money to go along with some of those associated actions. And then, you know, as Jeff and Chris Mannett, you know, mentioned, roughly 5 years looking at the citywide tree canopy assessment. And then also really that tree canopy assessment really supports some of the goals and visit climate action. Of course, you've heard a lot about our 55% canopy goal, and then certainly with our new land use code, Title 18, and some of these sub area, or I've heard we might be changing those to neighborhoods. You know, so some of the right now, I think we have, I should know this, 15 or so, you know, essentially sub areas that we have tree canopy data from our first assessment back in 2019. And the idea is, you know, having that data every 5 years or so can really help track, you know, the success of implementing our tree code and really try not to go backwards on tree canopies. So lots of benefits across departments here too.
I have a question. I'm looking at, was the end question, and I lost it on the end question number 7 in the, looks like it's a PDF. Edit that's like tracking.
Oh, the tracking one, yes.
Because that's all the rest of them are in progress or done. This is one, the only one looks like it's in.
The wildlife.
The wildlife.
Yes.
My question, I know this came up last time as like a potential recommendation. I don't think last time we saw it, it had the budget tied to it of the $120,000. And so I'm just curious, for that amount of money, what do we expect to learn that we wouldn't already be able to know or understand from existing data?
That's a good question. I might defer to Chris on the kind of budget estimate for that specifically. And it sounds like I think you've all heard that as part of the park system plan. We're trying to keep that as consistent as, you know, possible across plans here. We've heard a lot from, I think this group, but certainly from the environmental board and other interested parties about the importance of, you know, wildlife and habitat as it relates to our urban forest. And in this plan, we did focus on it tonight. We haven't past meetings around the riparian canopy analysis. This was the first time we did that in this, as part of this assessment. You know, so that's looking more specifically at, you know, salmon recovery and some of the wildlife that obviously uses our riparian areas as corridors. And I think there's a desire to look a little bit further past just those little bit more kind of linear networks and look at connectivity through the city and how that relates to, and Jeff, please correct me, or if you have different kind of views on this, but how it relates to, you know, connectivity in our park system, being mindful, of course, wanting to get people from creeks to peaks, but also, you know, if we have heavily utilized connections between Tiger and Squaw Mountain, how do we kind of plan around that? That might even tie into our transportation team and public works in terms of wildlife connectivity, whether that's, you know, not getting pipe dream here, but wildlife crossings or under crossings around Hobart, we know there's a lot of need for connections between Tiger and Squaw Mountains. And we see that use with our partnership with Woodland Park Zoo and some of the camera trapping we do with wildlife. We know, we kind of know where some of these hotspots are at, but it's never really been studied, formalized, or even a little bit more details on what are those kind of habitat needs and considerations for a kind of wider array of species, from, you know, some of our bigger carnivores to some of our smaller critters like amphibians, things like that, that also are really important part of the food web. So, Jeff, if anything you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, no, great question, Marlene. I think it's, I think what would be gotten out of an assessment or a actual, you know, urban wildlife network plan or corridor plan is trying to true up anecdotally what we think we know, right? So yes, we have the partnership with the zoo and have the coexisting with carnivore cameras. We have an idea of where patterns and uses are, but we don't fully know the details of that. And so I think it's trying to become that much more informed. Just for all aspects of operation of the city. It's certainly a priority we heard from environmental board. It's something we heard from our partners at the tribe. It's just, again, that understanding of not necessarily to limit what the city does, but to be that much better informed as we are making capital investments, as we're doing, all variety of providing services to residents.
So I think that's probably a question. We're trying to make sure it's as consistent as possible with, what ends up getting published in the park system plan, which is, a month or so ahead of our timeframe with the forest management plan. So, but we have it in there. I think that's something, kind of figuring out the scope. But Chris, I don't know if you have anything to add on, kind of where that cost estimate came from. And kind of the.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I was going to add that I looked at my notes here, and the reason it says in question is primarily because the terminology may change. We heard that it might be wildlife network instead of corridor. And we also want to make sure that we align it with the park system plan update in terms of terminology and costs. The $120,000 did come from notes received around that. It was not a study that we did for estimating costs. We can exclude that given that it's a primary focus of the park system plan and not include that cost line item in the UFMP, but there's some context, and that's partly another reason for the status being in question.
Yeah, and it is, again, an estimate. I would say as the city, if and when the city pursues doing that, I think we would aggressively pursue grant funds to help cover a big part of that. There are grant funds available to do that work.
So I have a question, and there's a lot to go through, and I just get to the cost, because what I hear from the city of Issaquah is that the council are considering cuts all across the board.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed here the recommendation that we will have 3 arborists. Is that, I guess my question is, what are other cities like Bellevue and Seattle? Do they have that many employees to work on it? And then, because for me, looking at how much in terms of the salary and the package, and so I'm just and looking at the recommendation for a truck at $450. Here we are, we're talking about tree and, environmental friendly. Is that something, is that the message we want to send? We got the F450 going up and down, the city. So I'm just kind of bringing this up as to, I try to understand the importance of what we're trying to do, but at the same time, looking at the cost and just doing the cost benefit analysis, and then coming from a taxpayer, I'm asking the question, we're paying the city of Issaquah employees, and now we are, who's funding who's splitting the bills?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'll take a first crack at that. We're always needing to balance cost benefit. I would say as we look at setting a target like that of internal resources for arborists or tree expertise, I can tell you our approach to date is probably what I would recommend our approach moving forward, is that we're not big enough as a city, an agency, or a park maintenance group to have specialized single task employees. So as we look at increasing our arborist expertise internally, it's probably someone who's a park maintenance worker who also has an arborist license, right? It's fulfilling that internal skill set with employees who are doing other stuff as well. That is something we constantly are always looking to do in the department, right? So as a recommendation, and maybe we look at rewording it, I think our intent isn't 3 arborists who all they're doing is arborist work. There are probably, up to 3 of our park maintenance employees who have an arborist license who are able to give knowledge to tree management. Currently, and again, moving into the future, there are often cases where we need to outsource the actual tree work, right? So how do we make sure we have internal expertise to evaluate, to understand what's happening with the tree? But if it's a big enough task or a big enough project, that's being outsourced. So always a balancing act. We're always having to look at funding, but we're always trying to look for diversity of skills, but also multi-capabilities of all of our employees. We're not big enough to be single task driven. Does that help?
I just, to be like a location in this,
Yeah,
we do have, I got my arborist certification, this year, and we actually got one of our parks worker too that got that as well. So we actually do have 2 right now, but to Jeff's point, yes, they're not, focused arborists 100% of the time, and having that skill, having that ability to kind of lean in as needed. I know you probably have, I'm guessing, interacted with Daniel Martinez, who's one of our community planners and does a lot of our work with our tree permits. I know he's been very interested in trying to get his certification. That wouldn't change his job dramatically, but essentially it gives you the credential to kind of make some determinations, hopefully informed determinations on stuff as it relates to trees. So I'll say right now, a decent chunk of my time I spend supporting both community planning and public works that relates to needing certified arborists, whether that's recommendations or just kind of informal consulting. But yes, having in an ideal world, I would say having one in parks, one in public works, and one in community planning would be great. Right now, the only 2 in the city are actually in parks and community services, myself and Christine.
Thanks, Dan. It's a great example.
If
So
I
long
could
as-
just also provide a response, is that all right?
Chris,
It's an important question around costs. And one thing that we try to do is put costs to actions to make sure that this discussion happens. I will say that in the long-term framework, the strategies and actions do not call for bringing on a 3-person in-house arborist crew. What it does is goal D3 says evaluate the staffing levels, structure, and resources for tree-related programs, and adjust as needed to meet the goals of the plan and growing demands of the urban forest. And so the cost estimates and the appendix is there for a supporting resource for consideration. It may not be 3, and Jeff and Dan did a good job of describing that it's going to be an overlap of different responsibilities. But I just want to mention that part of it. And, there is a goal to increase canopy cover. That means more trees, more maintenance. And then also, we did benchmark 19 other cities in the region to see what their staffing levels were. And then the internal staff survey spoke to needs for equipment and staffing. So like I said earlier, this appendix around costs and an in-house arborist crew could be pulled out of the plan, could be a separate document for when the conversation comes up again. But it's one of those things that we need to discuss and see where it fits in the plan or if it gets reworded or structured differently. So thank you.
So a quick question, on the funding, I'm looking at this, I assume it's conservative. We're talking about $8.6 million over the next 10 years. That's the number. Is that realistic? Are we going to evaluate that every year? That's a big number. Is it once it's approved, there you go, 8.6 million for the next 10 years? Okay. So
Definitely not. Much like the park system plan. This is meant to be aspirational. It's meant to highlight investment level that the city could take, but it is not a budget document. It is not adoption of this is not a mandate, just like the park system plan, right? It's meant to set a vision, and then actual funding of this program is dependent upon annual budget decisions of the city council. So yeah, not a mandate and
No, I understand.
reviewed every year.
Yeah.
A great question.
I'm
Yeah.
looking exactly right above there where it says the planning one-time cost, 1.6 million. Right, so it's like, do we want to spend that knowing that we could cut the rest and never implement the plan? Or could we, in theory, use it for something like Tibbetts, which we know, right? I mean, it's like, if you're gonna spend the money, you should do it, otherwise, why even spend the money in the first place, right? But I understand, yes, we have to reevaluate every year, that's the smart thing to do. But
How much of that 1.6 is spent just on like all the studies, whether we do it or not?
Chris, do you have anything to add to that? They're
Sorry.
discussing.
I heard the question around the 8.5, the overall cost over the 10-year period. And I echo what Jeff was saying, that it would not be fully committing to that cost once the plan is adopted. It would be up for decision during budget planning and how the city prioritizes different budget needs.
Yeah, I don't have the slide in front of me, but I think there's 1.6 million in planning. I don't think that's meant to be, that has to be done on the front end.
Yeah,
to do
so
the work.
Marlene, Chris, I believe, is asking, so on page 117 of the plan is the summarizing, potential city incurred costs. And it has a total one-time cost of 1.559 or $1.5 million plus, not to be incurred in any single year. So I think that is looking at some of the kind of plan development spread out throughout this. But would you mind clarifying that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. I'm on that page now, and if helpful, if it's permitted, just let me know. If not, I can go back to the presentation. But yeah,
Chris, that's good.
okay. Yeah, so what we did was just roll up the entire cost of doing everything, and so that you get a feel of what the ask is. But if you look at, really the priority would be around the inventory that was discussed, the plantings to achieve the canopy goal. And so we look at what the total one-time cost would be, is adding up these actions and strategies that have a cost to them. So it wouldn't be that you're doing an emerald ash borer plan the same year that you're doing neighborhood planting plans, the same year that you're doing, the an engagement strategy to support implementation. It would be whatever is decided during the budget planning process. And this would just be, in maybe an ideal world, if everything was done, what the cost would be. But then the 10-year cost then takes into account the planting, post-planting care, ongoing maintenance of trees to achieve the canopy goal, while doing these other things as well, inventory management software and all of the other items listed. And it also includes, for consideration, that 3-person arborist crew. So there's going to be some reworking of these cost tables on, but this can serve as a separate document as well for, when the opportunity arises for considering some of these actions that require funding. And there's a separate worksheet that really breaks down where these costs come from. It just wasn't, this was the best way to format it in a summary table. But if you have specific questions on the costs for plantings, because we consider caliper size plantings, we consider seedlings, we consider maintenance, city-led plantings, privately led plantings. We also look at, for management costs, we look at the post-planting care and then the ongoing maintenance for establishment. And then as it gets into routine tree pruning, if it's a tree in, like a landscaped area or along a streetscape.
And I would just add, last thing on David's point that Jeff kind of already hinted at when we were talking about the wildlife corridor or network study. There's also listed here with that $120,000 estimate. A lot of this, the tree inventory included. We were really looking at grant funds. The Department of Natural Resources have a fairly strong program that has funded most of the tree inventories and some urban forest management plans in the area too. So I mean, those will be resources we'll be looking at in the short term to implement some of these short-term goals. But that being said, I mean, it's still, there's still, costs that we can look at through the city when that is appropriate, when that is available. But, some of these things definitely will be leading into grant programs as well. And then the last thing Chris mentioned, if you all familiar when he says caliper trees, we're talking about usually pushing 2-inch diameter, trees. So we're talking about ball and burlap or large pots. So a lot of the estimates around tree numbers to achieve the 55% goal were based on that. I think we have somewhere in here, about $400+ per tree for, materials and labor. That's high end. I mean, a lot of our planting we do are with seedlings, 1-2 gallon, even bare root plants. So younger, you're going to have higher mortality, but they're a lot cheaper. We're talking more in the $5 to $10 to maybe $20, $30 a piece. And obviously some associated labor and maintenance. So there's ultimately going to probably be a mix of that, but we're kind of looking at the high end, especially if we're looking at that kind of 10-year time frame of achieving that canopy goal by 2035. Obviously the bigger material you put in, the quicker it will achieve that canopy height. But so that's something I think that's worth calling out too when we talk about caliper trees. The assumption for a lot of those planting costs is that we're putting in 6-7 foot tall, 2-inch diameter trees and not 1 to 2 foot seedlings, which we do a lot of through Issaquah.
Question for you now, going to budgets, et cetera, but on slide, it's page 3 of the plan, but it's slide 15 in the PDF. It's the existing programs and operations slide.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think your chart is not doing you any favors in the 9.11 versus 8.53. Aggressive. I'm just curious that that's our current spending, right? So if I'm looking at this, we're spending 36 do I read this as we're spending 36% of our budget on tree planting and initial care currently?
Of our tree related expenditures, yes. So yeah, I think Marlene's talking about, yes. So page 3 in the plan is Chris talked about doing the benchmark study, essentially comparing us to 19 similar sized cities in our region. This is information that's all submitted through our Tree City USA status, which we've been doing for 30+ years now. So yes, we are looking at essentially the ratios, and it's not surprising we do spend a lot on tree planting initial care, maybe not quite as much on the kind of the maintenance and management, but of course that's increased a lot just in the last year through hiring my position and our volunteer coordinator. So yeah, we're looking at that kind of dollars per capita, and for what it's worth, Tree City USA requires a minimum $2 per capita to earn that status, plus some other requirements too. But
my question is, we're at 9/11 right now. What is this plan put us at?
I'm not sure we've done that calculation. And also to Jeff's point, we haven't committed to spending or funding.
It's just hard for me to recommend a plan. I don't have any scale.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I don't know. It'd be interesting to make sure we're comparing apples to apples, but at $9.11 per capita, this is roughly saying, we're investing about 300 and some thousand a year, $360,000 a year in tree management. And yeah, comped to other 19 cities, we're probably doing pretty well, but we also have a big 1,000+ acres of urban forest that this city has chosen to purchase over the decades that, we need to steward. So,
Yeah,
I think it does us.
I can't tell. So it's not me saying it's wrong.
Yeah, and I'm not defending. I'm just saying, yeah, we're I think this does us a good service in that we're investing at a pretty good rate. My apples to apples comment was more, I think it would be informative, instructive to take that prior table. If our target is roughly, and when you roll up a 10-year number, it looks huge, right? 88 million. If that rolled up, if that's 800 and some thousand a year that we're saying we want to try and invest over the next 10 years, if we're already at 300 and some thousand, is that apples to apples, right? Or is that comparable? That could at least give context to say, hey, we're doing well with our current investment at X. If we really wanted to start looking at some of these other goals, the investment rate we could consider is this. But again, once again, just like the park system plan, this is not requiring us to take this action. It's just saying, hey, we really want to be stewards of this forest that the community has chosen to buy over the last 40 years. Here's what we should be aware of, or at least considering. So that might help give, I don't know if that would help, at least give scale, at least give scale.
So we think we need to double our investment in urban forestry to keep pace. And that might be true, I'm just asking.
To potentially try to accomplish everything in here. I mean, I was just doing some quick math, the things we've presented as possible addition in the next budget cycle with, once again, the caveat that a lot of this will be looking through, non-general funds, whether that's grant funding, whether that's our dedicated tree fund that we haven't, to be honest, been real great at tapping or utilizing as a city here over the past. We looked at putting a placeholder for $80,000 in for the tree inventory, another $25,000 or so for plant material planting we're looking kind of over the next 2 years. So I mean that is maybe not a doubling as much as it's like about a time and a half. So if that addition to kind of status quo, we're looking at more maybe like $12 per capita or something like that. And that's really just forecasting the next 2 years where we have a little bit more, I wouldn't say certainty, but a better idea of what we were hoping to pull from this plan and then continue to build out this program.
And any per capita,
Right, so like, is this separate from the park plan or is this in the budget of the park plan? So like, we have a park plan budget and there's an urban forestry budget. Is it nested underneath park or separate?
this would be separate, right? The park system plan is really looking at capital investment within the park system. This plan is looking at management and maintenance of the urban forest, right? So I wouldn't say it's totally nested. There might be some degree of overlap. I think another just key consideration is that whatever the per capita number is we're at currently or striving to, or what will be in the future, that likely assumes a decent amount of that is grant funded as well. Again, how are we leveraging? So per capita might be a confusing way to, it's not as if everyone's paying $9 and some are $12 into it. That's just the divided rate per resident. But again, grants are we're very aggressive with leveraging local dollars with grants. So maybe there's a great discussion. It feels like maybe there's some additional context we could give to these sort of aspirations, or maybe, rethink.
So like we keep talking about it being aspirational. Is it like, hey, it's pie in the sky, but I think we're actually gonna get 50% of this? Or is it like, oh, we're about 80% there and maybe, there's 20% that's probably a little bit too ambitious?
Well, I'll let the experts follow me, please. But I guess when I say aspirational, I see it as this is we want to get to a level where we can manage the public urban forest in this way. We're aspirational in terms of, are we going to get there in 10 years? Are we going to be able to do all of this in 10 years? Probably not. We want to get to all of this, but it might take us 20 plus years to get there as opposed to 10. So it's more the rate than it is how much we want to do. Similar to the park system plan, right? That we would love to do everything in the near term, midterm, long term, but it's really going to be dependent upon community deciding how much they want to invest their capital dollars into the park system.
And I guess I'd add to that is that the biggest variable cost, obviously, is this tree planting goal to try to achieve 55%. And that's something this group discussed, both the feasibility and the practicality of that. So I think that's something that we need to revisit throughout this 10-year process. And it also relates to our climate action plan. And it's touched upon in this forest management plan too, there's big variables that we won't know about for another year or two. For instance, the state building code has proposed defensible space as part of wildfire preparedness, and the initial maps they published, which without advising, showed pretty much the entirety of Issaquah. We're hoping it's going to be a little more fine grained than that, but that would be putting huge implications on, essentially not having trees within 30 feet of structures, and all of a sudden our planting goal and our planting goals are absolutely getting revised and downsized. So there's a lot of variability. So I would say the aspirational variable cost in here is mostly connected to our 55% tree canopy goal in our Issaquah climate action plan. I know there's already been discussions amongst this board, environmental boards, and public around the feasibility, practicality, and I would say that is aspirational. I think we'll have some kind of more ground truthing on that over the next few years based on things out of our control, and then certainly what we're able to do as a program around funding and tree planting there. But like I said, the wildfire preparedness stuff is huge in terms of impacts that might have on tree canopy.
It's a great connection, Dan. You're right. The rate of tree planting and tree management as it pertains to trying to hit that 55%, will have a cost. I mean, it has a higher cost, and not here to judge, but it's that if we're at 51 or 53, what is that extra 3%, 4% costing?
I feel like Chris or someone might have asked that at the board meeting in June, obviously, where is there maybe diminishing returns or, where that's at. And I do want to call out that I know this isn't revenue, but the current conditions, talks about because we talked about the cost of maintenance, the installation, but, we'll hopefully not lose track of, also the benefits these trees in this urban forest are providing to stormwater retention as it relates to heat island, impacts we're already dealing with and trying to lessen that as it relates to, just our mental health and physical health of having a community, that's pretty well greened, for lack of a better term there. So that is in the current conditions section where we're looking at, iTree is really the go-to tool for trying to put a value on individual trees or urban forests. And we're looking at $2 million plus a year as it relates to air quality improvement, stormwater management, it's green infrastructure, carbon sequestration, and all that sort of stuff. So that's tough, because that doesn't mean we're getting a check for $2 million. But I hope people don't lose sight of the essentially ecosystem service benefits that our trees and our urban forest provide.
Huge return on that investment. And if Chris has his hand up.
Great, thanks. And I'll apologize if I'm asking for some repeated information, learning that it's a little harder to hear some of the folks' questions and comments. So with this report and update, we have kind of two options as a board. We are asked either to recommend moving forward with the draft urban forest management plan for city council to adopt it, or recommend that staff make modifications and bring back a next version before we make that recommendation. Before we come to that decision, just hearing some of our own comments, I guess I'd like to ask for maybe clarification if my understanding is correct. So this is sort of an ideal plan with an ideal budget, and it is thoroughly written and deeply investigated and researched. You can see that in it and you can read it. And I think one of the concerns that was conveyed is, hey, is this going to take 8.6 million from park facilities that are very near and dear to many of our board members' hearts? And I guess I would like to confirm, let's say the board, makes a recommendation to move this forward. It goes to city council. City council still has to look at both this as part of one of their budget items and whatever we're asking for, whatever Parks Department is asking for capital improvements, and they will be the final decision makers on what budgets get approved and what don't. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, very correct, Chris. And even put a finer point on that. Investments into our park system would be capital investments. So those would be, and these tree management, forest management conversations would be part of the operating budget. So just putting these two would not be competing against one another for similar funding.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? I can't quite tell, but let me know.
Anyone else? Comments, questions?
Great discussion.
And also, there's room for some more editing and revising here based on this conversation. That will definitely be happening. This is not, final version. And any action that you all take as a board is advisory and can come with, an extra caveat of as long as, these changes or clarifications are sort of added in if needed. Like there's definitely flexibility there for that.
Yeah, we could like email some thoughts later on after the fact. I was not here. I was on part of the board when the first draft of this was done, so I'm still kind of ingesting
All of it.
And so this has helped clarify a lot of things just in my first pass of it. So I might have thoughts later on to just add to it, even if we were to say this looks good, pass it along,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to remind me of the public comment process for this.
Yeah, perfect.
So this is the Parks Committee, and you're assuming that's what y'all recommend us to move forward to in October. So I mean, it's certainly not the last time this would be seen with the public, but, and to Santi's point too, yes, if there's, we recommend to move forward, but we want to reassess, look at this, whether that's, as we've already talked about, the 3-person in-house arborist crew, which is a significant cost of that, or just, continual kind of reassessment of some of those tree planting targets as it relates to ICAP. Those are really the two largest and probably most variable cost over the 10 years of this, to maybe more right size this for city resources.
Okay, let's back up Chris's hand. That's what my question is.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so sounds like we have a decision here as a board.
All right,
Whether we-
Marlene has one more question.
Yeah.
Oh, please go ahead.
Sorry, Chris, I know you're trying to move us along, and I appreciate it. My question
Oh, no problem. I just can't see.
is on slide 108 of the, or I guess it basically starts on. My question is about the implementation plan. Priorities 3, 2, 1. Like, can you just explain? So I'm guessing priority 3 means it's your lowest priority. I just want to confirm how these work.
Yes.
Which page is that?
So I mean, it's throughout the implementation plan.
I'm looking at page 101.
So 3 is the highest, yes.
3 is the highest priority or the lowest priority?
Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, in the prioritization for the implementation table, we have 1 to 3, with 3 being a highest priority, 1 being lower. So essentially kind of a 3-tier rank after that.
Got it. So
Yeah,
number 1 priority is actually priority 3. Is the way I should read this, right?
Yeah.
It works well with the interactive worksheet, the way we have it set up. But yeah, there is a table on page 100 of the plan to describe it. But yeah, good question there. And I will say it includes the audit results, staff and interested party feedback, and our urban forestry recommendation to align with industry standards and best practices. So that's something that, as you monitor and evaluate the plan, the priority may change, but it's a starting point to really narrow down on those items to address in the short term.
Got it. Thank you. I should have read the key at the top. I jumped right into the details.
No
Okay.
worries, I do the same thing.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
Back to you, Chris.
Okay, so our decision is, do we have a motion to recommend moving forward with this current draft urban forest management plan, perhaps with some, additional revisions responsive to this meeting for city council adoption?
I could make a motion. Oh, just second it. I can second it.
Okay, so Chris, sounds like we have someone to second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand, and Hasanti, if you could help me count.
Yeah, so I also, all alternates, can and should vote because we have two regular members out tonight.
Please.
3, 4, 5, I've got 6 in the room and 2 on screen, so that's everyone.
Say again, Hasanti, please.
So that's 8 votes, all 8 unanimous.
Okay, then we don't need to talk about the other motion, which was to revisit it and bring it back. Okay, then I think that concludes that item. Is that correct?
It does. Can I ask clarity in that 8-0? Thank you for that. Dan, Chris, thank you a bunch. Is there, in our discussion, I think we talked about maybe clarifying the arborist piece a little bit more, agree with that. Clarifying some of the, I think just the budget piece around what does aspirational mean? What does this $8 million number really look like? Really good feedback. And I think it might be helpful, Chris, P, and Dan to try and do some revision, because I think park board questions are going to be very reflective of what could be city council questions as well. So really, really helpful discussion. Big thank you to all of you. Also, big thank you. We had an ad hoc group that helped to do some of the lift here. That included Brad Book, former park board member, and Zach as well. So former park board members who continue to do really thoughtful and good work. So thanks to both of them.
Thanks, Jeff. And yeah, thank you all. And Paul, to your point, to the rest of you, I mean, yes, if you have questions, comments, even minor feedback, edits, or further thoughts on some of these kind of bigger budget discussions we've had tonight, please don't hesitate to send them directly to me or through Hasanti and Jeff, whatever is easiest. I would say if possible, ideally in the next, 1 to 2 weeks as we kind of shape this up, and then try to get it to council subcommittee, I should say, on October 15th. So we try to have a weekly time for that. So that's, about 2 weeks out that we'll be, putting together memo and materials for that meeting, and, any adjustments that we're still working on this draft of the plan. So please don't hesitate, or even if you want to set up a quick call with me, that would be great.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for that. I mean, obviously it's a very detailed plan. So to everybody who works on it, and also I could just tell when you spoke about it, you're super passionate about it. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, well, thank you
Thank
all. These are the conversations we need. I appreciate everyone's thoughtful questions. So I'll be syncing up with Dan to go over these, and yeah, thank you for the time tonight.
Good. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Dan and Chris. Okay, next regular business item is the donation bench program update, and Hasanti is going to present that.
That is me. Yeah.
Thanks again, everyone.
So I don't know how many of you all know this, but we here at the City of Issaquah have a donation bench program that was started actually back in 2019. And it's an opportunity for the community to sort of make some more investments in our park system and sort of support our park system as a whole, offer space for all of our community, and an opportunity to have a little bit of acknowledgement and recognition, either in parks or places that have meaning for them or for loved ones. We have had this program, like I said, since 2019, and we put a short pause on the program in 2023 about, partially because we were having some issues with the bench manufacturing and supply actually. And then we also just kind of needed to give the whole program another look and make sure that it's still functioning as it needs to. So I'm gonna just go through a little bit of sort of what the current program looks like, how many benches we have, and then go through what the ordinance language was that this program was adopted through. So all donations at the city sort of go through this ordinance process for how they are accepted as a city. So whether that's a monetary donation, a donation for a specific project or program, or a donation of actual physical items. And so we set this program up as a donation towards the cost of a bench that can be then installed in a park. And some of the language that we're proposing changes to it just cover more of that cost as we've gone through the program and realized sort of, oh, just the bench is not quite everything that goes into installing a bench in one of and then at the end of this, I'm hoping for some action from the board to move the ordinance language forward for city council to review and then adopt the changes. And they're pretty minor changes, but we can go through what they are. And if anybody has any questions, please by any means stop me during, after, throughout. So just a little look, there's a couple of pictures of some of our current donation benches right now. One of them along the Rainier Trail near the community center. There's one in Confluence Park. And then these bottom two are actually at Central Park looking over some of the field space. And so, like I mentioned, the program started in 2019 and we took a pause in 2023. So far, we've had 13 benches donated across multiple community parks. And we actually have one in a neighborhood park over at Blackberry Park. When that park renovation was happening, there was a group that wanted to donate a bench there. And so we don't typically have this program available in neighborhood parks, but that one felt really special for that neighborhood. And so there's actually a bench over at Blackberry Park as well. And there's lots of different options for where these benches can be. And so this map is very tiny on here. It's really hard to get our entire city into one frame, and even this isn't the whole city. But these little dots that you're seeing on here are the bench location options. So the park planners actually went out and looked at all of our spaces throughout our park system and mostly in our community parks of places where it'd be really great to have a bench here. We don't currently have the inventory or the funding to cover this, but this could be a really great spot for a community member who maybe wants to have a bench and have some sort of commemoration there. And so I believe the red dots are where benches already currently exist that are part of the program, and then the black dots are locations that are still available. We have been sort of going through all of our parks and assessing whether there are more locations that could be added. There are some spaces in along one of our nature trails to add some benches down in Issaquah Valley North. And so that also may be something that we start assessing as we sort of work on our trail network of if there's more locations that these donation benches could potentially be located.
So just,
sorry.
no, it's great. Don't apologize. Really good overview of something. I think just to emphasize, intentionality was a big part of this program. Is how do we, in fact, coming out of the 2018 park plan adoption, adding seating along our trails and our community parks was a high priority. And so we really wanted this program to be one of, hey, let's have our park planning team identify those specific locations that really could use a bench and invite the community to donate those areas. So it's really sort of matching community need with community interest in making an investment into the system. So it's been a really big success that way.
I didn't know. So there is a portion of the ordinance that I put in here. A lot of it is, I will say, sort of, ordinance jargon. And so there's a lot of whereases in there. But this is like the main portion of the ordinance that we're looking at that really talked about offsetting the cost of the purchase of the bench. And that donation would go towards, again, the purchase price. and potentially some associated costs for maintenance and management ongoing. And so the reality of these benches is they're, for the most part, we've sort of phased them at a 15-year sort of life cycle for those benches. And so to maintain and manage them for 15 years, there's not a ton of cost to them. But there is like some incremental cost to making sure that they, you know, are cleaned every so often, and stay free of, you know, graffiti and dirt and all those things. And then also the part that is towards the purchase price. So when this program started in 2019, benches cost a certain dollar amount. Then COVID happened, benches cost a different dollar amount. And then during COVID, actually our manufacturer that we were using, their quality changed drastically and their lead times just became like far too long for us to be able to maintain the program. So someone was coming and saying they wanted to donate a bench. We were going through the process. And then for some of them, it was up to a year later that we were able to actually get the bench and install that, which didn't feel like a really good way of managing a program, hence the pause that we put on the program. And so during that pause, we've sort of been reassessing, looking at costs, and also reevaluating for a new manufacturer. And so we found one that matches pretty closely, that has much shorter lead time, that is, there's a local supplier that we can order them through. And so we're sort of ready to make that new, open the program back up. But with that, the cost of the benches has risen about twice to what they were originally when this program started. So that's a big cost. And then another cost that we sort of have been looking at is the actual foundation for the benches. So in some of the places, the concrete foundation already exists. And so that's a quick, easy, you know, if there's a bench there, we're sort of taking that bench out, a couple screws, put another one in. But for some of them, we actually have to pour concrete pads. And so that concrete and that labor and maintenance work brings that cost up a little bit more too. And I think what we've sort of noticed is there's more places that need that for these benches than not. And if it's getting placed in a nature location, that obviously the concrete cost is different, but there is other footings that do need to be sort of done and put in place. I kind of already went through sort of what the rationale is for these. But the proposed language, actually, this is a change. We had a conversation with our city attorney about this recently, who helps with some of our ordinance language. And what we're actually proposing changing the language to is, instead of just offsetting the cost, to look closer to covering the cost of the bench and the potential like footing, with the assumption that most of them will require that. And recognizes sort of the change and rising costs. The current language allows for some flexibility to apply those funds outside of just the purchase of the bench, but this language sort of solidifies that there's greater flexibility for the mayor to make further adjustments to the program into the future. So it won't necessarily require a full ordinance review and going back through council to do changes if we get to a point where, you know, our costs are going up just because of the nature of products becoming more expensive, while also looking at something that is, you know, be the most cost effective, match our current city aesthetic and standards, and allow for us to still have sort of the plot installed within the benches.
So to reiterate all that, great overview, Asante. Our current bench donation program, the fee is $3,000. As we look at costs now, and you know, concrete pad installation all in, we are really seeing that fee need to be closer to $5,000. We still want it to feel doable and not unattainable for someone who's wanting to honor a family member or donate for whatever reason. And then moving forward, we realize the changing world we're in and those costs as they go up. really asking council to say, hey, if you agree that the goal is to cover the cost of this program, we just want the ability to work with the mayor's office to increase that fee as we need to. We're not trying to make a profit on this program. We're just trying to cover costs and provide intentional addition of benches and ways for loved ones and family members to recognize someone.
I'm gonna pause there and see if there are any questions, comments, thoughts.
Did you have more supply, like, were people, like, more people wanted to get benches and you had benches to do? So like, as we almost, you're gonna end up doubling by the time this actually gets off the ground, these sticks, right? Like, things move, right? So like, are we gonna still have enough people at that cost? Do we think?
I believe so. I know as we've initiated this, and when you think about it, we launched this in 2019. We did a lot of benches those first years. A global pandemic hit and kind of caused us to pivot a little bit. Even as we had to push pause afterwards, we continue to have inquiries. We have a lot of people interested, like, hey, please make this ordinance change, set the fee, we're ready. So I think interest will continue to be out there. We have interest in the dog park already for a couple benches there, so.
You should let people do, when you do the sidewalk, you should do the little stones.
Yeah.
So am I hearing that you're gonna be adjusting the cost, let's say 2 years from now, instead of the bench costing $5,000, it's gonna cost $6,000. Then you're still, the language is gonna be where it's still gonna cover, no regardless.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah. Hey, city council, we want that ordinance to say the intention is to cover the costs. Give us the flexibility to do that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Do you need us to
Pretty cut and
propose
dry.
bringing this to council?
Pardon?
Do you need us to propose bringing this to council?
I,
Do you agree with us? Yeah.
just sort of,
I don't know when it takes a vote.
I know, I do think I have this down as sort of an action item. And I sent some language over to Chris, if everyone feels comfortable, if there's other questions or any sort of clarification that might be needed in there, but.
Ryan has a question.
Yeah, I thought it would be nice to bring this back to all of you, those of you that were here in 2018-19 when we launched this, it came out in park board discussion. So it's a great opportunity to say, hey, well done. Here's a program that's gotten legs, and do we all agree to make this slight little tweak? Sorry, Ryan.
Ryan, go ahead. Oh, you're still muted.
Do you have the number of benches of those 13 by year? And how many of those more specifically were last year or the year 2022 before the pause?
We do have that data. Whether I have it off the top of my head or easily accessible is a different question. But to my memory, I think we probably installed about 4 benches in the last sort of 22 to the 23 before we paused it. We had four benches that we installed.
So 9 prior.
And so 9 prior to that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's mostly just a feedback. I don't disagree with the proposed ordinance language, but if the generation of the program, the root of the program was to provide the community with the opportunity to honor someone, honor something, honor some organization or people with a bench so that people can be finding rest while they're recreating or they need to take a break. I don't think increasing the cost twofold is going to get you more benches. I agree it will cover the cost of the bench. I'm not disagreeing there. But if the root of the original why this project started and the genesis of it was to fulfill a certain kind-hearted wonderful feel good thing. Doubling the cost, I don't think is going to do that. But again, I don't disagree with the proposed ordinance. I'm just making a note.
Yeah, it's a totally fair point that it does. It was one of the reasons that during the pause, it took us sort of longer to review it. The hope was that we were gonna pause for like 3 months and then reopen it at the beginning of the year, and that didn't happen. And the reality is we want to make sure that these benches are still able to be sort of purchased and aren't eating into current funds and be able to actually still offer this program. And just given the drastic change in landscape from 2019 to today, 2024, I mean, it's not something that we want to have to do, is to raise the price almost double. But there probably should have been some marginal changes and increases sort of every year for this program, and that also just didn't happen. So I agree with you, Ryan. I will say we do have like maybe 3 to 4 people that have inquired. We haven't released that this is sort of the new pricing, and so that's part of this process, is making sure that we've sort of reviewed all of this and that it's approved by city council before we make that change. But that will be coming, and so that will sort of tell us, yeah.
But yeah, materials costs and everything have changed since 2018.
So basically, can we have a manufacturer that we, and you got a quote, and based on the quote and the assessment of how much it would be to maintain it, that's the number you're coming. Correct. Okay, all right. But that makes more sense, because like you said, 3,000 was in 2019, right?
Right.
So things, yeah.
Yeah, things have changed since then. And then Brenda, I saw.
I'm thinking the opposite side of this. I think probably get more people requesting to donate than you can fill these 3 or 4 spots you show you have benches available. And how can you broaden this so that they can donate to other things in memorandum or whatever? And I don't see the price increase problem at all. I think what I'm seeing is you don't have enough places to put benches. And what else besides benches can people donate?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brett. As we launched this program, we talked about, hey, let's crawl before we walk before we run. Let's get this down with benches, and who's to say we make, picnic tables and other amenities or site furnishings an option.
Be open to
Other options. So exactly, that's where we're hoping to take this.
To that point, is there anything you need to add to this ordinance that could give you that flexibility later without having to go through a whole bunch of steps? Could you add that? I don't know if that's already in there or not.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. For this particular program, it is tied specifically to the bench donation program, and there's like programmatic documentation that went with that still has to stay, like stating that this will go towards sort of this bench, that you get a plaque and what sort of goes into it. However, there was another discussion this year with City Council regarding donations and financial policy, actually, for the acceptance of donations, that does allow some flexibility there. So if there were someone that came with a site furnishing that they would like to donate, or they would like to offer the option of adding, stone pavers and do a program like that, there is already language that would allow the city to accept that type of donation through a process.
I think what we're also trying to do is really mesh the interest of donations with effective management of your public space, right? So we're trying to identify those standard pieces of equipment or standard look and feel that's going to make it easier for us to maintain, and not necessarily look like, oh, that's table's totally different than that table, which is totally different than that, because that becomes can become really hard to manage. So yes, it's a great question, Brenda, and a great point. And I think one, we would love to sort of expand this into other amenities.
This is not quite about the ordinance, but it was from the earlier discussion around sort of the locations in your map. And I love the idea about like where are the walking trails that could use a bench, and I might even suggest like asking the senior center. So I know when like my mother-in-law chooses her walks based on where there are enough benches, right? So could be an interesting stakeholder group.
Yeah. Absolutely. There are definitely some more trail sort of review that I think we want to do sort of internally for where these locations could get added.
I love seeing the two benches close to our office, right there at the Rainier Trail and the community center, right by the lawn. You know, since we added those, it's just so cool to see how often they're used. And then again, properly placed seating makes a huge difference. And suddenly you have people lingering and not just going. So, great program.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I guess with that, if you all feel ready, I'll pass it to Chris.
Yeah, so the request here is, do we have a motion to recommend moving forward with the changes to the donation bench program for city council to review and adopt?
Yes.
Brenda motioned
Second.
and David second.
All those in favor, raise your hand.
7, 8, great, all 8, thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, then we move on to the next item, the last item of regular business, which is the Parks and Community Services Summer Highlights by Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vasanthi. It looks like you're going to drive.
I'm gonna try to.
Okay, I appreciate that. For the sake of time, great discussions tonight on all these items. Just shared with you some communication I had with City Council. Always love the opportunity to just give you an update on activities, but also just give a shout out to the work of this department and a really, really amazing team that we should all be really, really proud of. Rather than reciting, I shared with you in a memo really some fun facts of participation, but also some really compelling data. I'm going to just not read these word for word because of time, but highlight a number of them that are really Parks and Recreation Program related. For the purposes of council, I included some other really key parts of our department. Human Services, as a reminder, is in our Parks and Community Services Department. It provides a really cool opportunity to join our recreation programs with our Human Services programs and professionals. This first slide is a great example of that. We have a great community event we do, Chalk Art Festival, that's held at the community center. We've leveraged that fun event by having a human services fair at the same time. And it's been great to see how those sort of events have really helped us support one another. I won't dive too far into some of the human services work since it's really overseen by the Human Services Commission, but just I think important for all of you to know as park board members, the diversity of this department really adds to what we're able to do and how we're able to provide services to the community. If you go to the next slide, Arts Commission and arts staff did a film festival. If any of you are interested in film, this was really, really cool. And Regal Cinemas partnered with us. Read the notes. We had 3 students come back and really collaborate on this film festival. Very, very popular event that went away a little bit, like many of our events for the pandemic, but came back with a flourish. The next slide highlights, again, an art piece, but one that I think we love in parks and you all played a real role in, if you remember. Where do we locate Jacob? How do we locate Jacob? Jacob's been a huge hit. Jacob had his first birthday on September 1st of this year. Amazing to think, conservatively, 250,000 people have come to visit Jacob. Many of those are non-residents that have come to enjoy and experience Issaquah. We were very intentional about having Jacob on an accessible trail, the Reindeer Trail, and close to downtown. So many of those visitors then turn around and go into Old Town and enjoy a beverage or a meal. And so art properly placed in parks can really be a pretty cool economic incubator. And Jacob has certainly proven that to be the case. Next slide as we launch into some of our events. Touching on this one really quick. Culture Fest is an event we do to kick off the school year. Eastside communities all around us have a different welcoming week they call event. It's been really cool to see how this has grown. We did this on September 6th. Again, the community center lawn was alive with great music and great food and community coming together in some pretty cool ways. Also on the lawn, our concerts experienced another great summer. Even in spite of some kind of goofy Tuesday weather. I don't know if you guys notice in summer, sometimes a certain day of the week sort of gets the oddball weather. Tuesdays this year kind of got that the odd weather, and yet you still had probably over 7,500 people come throughout the 8 events to enjoy great summer sounds there at the community center lawn. Ironically, also on the lawn. Wow, I didn't do this, but a lot of action on that lawn. July 4th, the down home 4th has been a tradition here in Issaquah for many years. This year represented a first, in that we as the Parks Department were asked to take the lead in operating and providing the 4th of July event. Led to some great work by the team. We did a little bit of reinvention of the event, added a lot more fun and diversity of activities in the field of fun. So post parade, extended the parade down Front Street a little bit to come in the lawn. I had the opportunity with one of our city council members, Councilmember Russell Joe. We co-emceed the main stage and some minute to win it games and activities. But I think from my vantage point, seeing 3,000 plus people really just having a great time and a really fun day was, again, hats off to the team. Day camps, looking at some of our programs. You may recall some of the conversations we had at the beginning of the year about recognizing that though we can call summer day camps filling up in 10 minutes a success, and that isn't necessarily a customer service experience that we wanted. And so we really very intentionally set about ways to increase capacity within our camps and how we looked at doing registration. And again, just hats off to the recreation team. We went from a roughly 2,300 camp registrations in 2023. We increased that almost double. 50% increase to 3,500 camp registrations throughout our full spectrum of camps. That's not without a lot of hard work by programming staff, a lot of hiring and training, part-time staff to be our sort of frontline programmers, if you will. They really are a heart and soul of those camps, and so. Just a great work by the recreation team, and the community was very supportive of that effort to add capacity to camps. A few quotes that came from our evaluations I included in our in the email summary there. Next slide, looking at Pickering Barn. Yes. Another one of our facilities that we manage, Farmers Market, continues to just hit it out of the ballpark. Again, we had record numbers in 2023, only to have them broken in 2024. The fact that we're averaging over 4,000 visitors every single Saturday. If you want to sort of get a taste of what our department is, any given Saturday, go to the Farmers Market. It's our programming staff doing amazing work. The park maintenance team, what they've done to the grounds at Pickering Barn, such an inviting space. It's just a great example of what we do. On an equity standpoint, this is the first year that we added both EBT and SNAP match. Those are state programs that really align and encourage access to healthy local food. Those programs have both been instituted and had huge participation, both from participants, but also it requires our vendors to be willing partners in that. So close to 5,000, in fact, well now, this next Saturday is our last farmer's market of the season. We're well over $5,000 in funds redeemed through that program. So Pickering Barn staff does great work. Also at the barn, as the photo suggests, that is a space that we really wanted to be intentional about diversifying how the barn is rented. And it's been really cool to see just the variety of rentals, the types of rentals, 93 bookings as of the time we did this, so the end of summer. We'll be well over 100 bookings throughout the calendar year at Pickering Barn for all variety of events and programs. It really is an iconic building for Issaquah, and it should be used by the public in a wide variety of ways. Transitioning to one of our other facilities, the Bones Pool. Much like our camps, again, it could be a badge of honor to say, wow, we book swim lessons in 3 minutes. But again, not the best customer service experience that we want. So Zach and the pool team did an amazing job also of how do we add capacity to a burgeoning, very popular swim lesson program. Summer numbers, again, showed a record 2023 of 900 plus registrations for swim lessons. We topped 1,200 this summer. So again, speaks to some great work by our staff. That's well over 50 lifeguards and part-time instructors that we hire. Katie's familiar in the swim community with many of those employees we hire. It's really important intentional work in hiring and training those lifeguards and swim instructors. And much like camp staff, and I think you guys have heard me say this before, we're often a first employer to many teenagers. That's a program in and of itself, and is launching and teaching kids to be a great employee and be responsible. And both the pool staff and the community center staff just do a fantastic job with that. Not to be outdone on the park side of things. Some of you have hopefully seen as you've gone around town our new signage, our new trail signage. Example here at the Rainier Trail, as well as some of our park signs that have gotten updated. Great job by the park ops team instituting that. As we talked about park plan, and as we've talked about urban forestry, what's the rate with which we will be changing out signs? That will be really dependent upon budget availability, but we hope as through the coming years, we'll see more and more of these signs and the standardization of signage throughout the system. Another project that the team's led and done a great job with, working very closely with our cemetery board, but certainly a shout out to the park ops team. A number of years ago, pre-pandemic, we took a really hard look at the cemetery and the cemetery fund, and the fact that cemetery is getting really close to capacity, and yet the cemetery fund isn't as healthy as we would want it to be able to sustain maintenance. So we really started to look at creative ways to add capacity within the existing footprint of the cemetery. This is one example of that, where we have created a columbarium plaza and did a first installation here. There'll be room for expansion. This is in the lower cemetery. But as a cemetery fund is really meant to function as an enterprise, we'll wait for these columbaria to get to 70% capacity sold, and then we'll add some additional columbarium capacity to the area. So Rick Still, our park ops manager, has done a great job of working with the cemetery board on that project. Also, just overall, some great work done by Park Ops. Please take a minute in the memo to see just some of the fun data. When you really look at the volume of work that our team does, well over 200 park shelter reservations. Those don't just happen. We have to sort of manage and maintain those. Larger weekend sports tournaments that we're seeing happening within our systems, both lacrosse and baseball and softball. Always great to see the amount of fence that was done. The trail repair work that we've been able to do with some of our capital trail repair program. Great work there. We talked a little bit earlier tonight about trees. 2,000 trees planted this summer, over 800 trees pruned throughout the system. That's really, really important work in terms of not only looking at the canopy within our city, but the health of the canopy within our city. Last couple of slides here, park planning related updates. Excited to say Hillside Park is under construction, well under construction. There's a couple of photos from the site. As the new play area in the corner of the field is really starting to take shape. A couple photos there of the new trail that we've cut in along the buffer area. So this is really removing that age-old conflict of neighbors wanting to get access to the park, cutting through the cul-de-sac of the cemetery and through gravestones. This allows for a little more respectful access to Hillside Park. The field and the field improvements, the drainage is all in. We just did the seeding. The contractor did the seeding late last week. We're now waiting for, much like we're talking about with benches, supply of playground equipment, waiting for that to show up. But when all is said and done and grass is in, really excited for a great neighborhood party as we reopen that park next spring. And then our other big capital project, our plazas project, the pedestrian plaza and senior center plaza. A little bit of a blip. We're hoping to be opening bids today. We had a small administrative item we caught, so we're going to be opening bids. We let all of our contractors know we're going to open bids this Friday. Again, continues to be a lot of excitement amongst the contracting community for this project, so very encouraged. We'll open bids on Friday and then take this for bid award to City Council on October 7th. Council community are pretty excited about this project too. We'll look at maybe doing some type of a ribbon cutting, groundbreaking. Got to do the groundbreaking before the ribbon cutting, but a groundbreaking this fall with an anticipated opening of this new space late spring, early summer next year. So a lot happening. I'm excited to get both of those projects through permitting and now looking headlong into construction of both of those. So very, very busy summer. Again, an amazing staff in Parks and Community Services. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but I'm just proud of the team that continually makes some pretty amazing investments into your park system.
Very good.
Excellent work.
I heard very good feedback about the new CIT program. So.
Oh, yes.
My kids' age group is that middle school, like CIT age group, and so. The parents were big fans of not having to commit to an entire summer, but still letting them have a couple weeks to do it, so.
That's great. So CIT is our counselor and training program. Thank you, Marlene. You're right. So within our summer day camps, it's really a great opportunity for those early teens, preteen age group to get a taste of responsibility and still have a camp experience, but really sort of be on the other side of the curtain and helping us deliver the program. So 38, I believe, we had 38 CITs throughout the summer this year.
Yeah, just an anecdote from me, personal.
Yeah.
6-year-old daughter went to 6 different camps, only one at Issaquah, and she said that was her favorite. The pirate king.
Oh,
Thanks.
yeah.
Great to hear. 6-year-old, it must have been kinder camp? Yeah.
And did you only get into one Issaquah camp?
I'm working on that as well. That's great. Thank you both.
Well, I have to say that, they get 2 trees, that's just been phenomenal. I was out walking the dog and my husband on Sunday, and there was somebody, an older couple that was coming up as we were coming down the Rainier Trail already from it. And by the community center, and then there was a couple that asked us, "Oh, where's this troll and how far is it?" And, because people don't, really know. I'm like, you will not be disappointed. It's not very far to do it, but I was surprised even how crowded it was. Every time I go, it seems like there's always people milling about. And the one thing too that I really appreciate is how clean the trail has been kept. Because as we all know, those of us who've been here a while, that's not always been a very clean trail. So I just think it's such a great, he's just been such a wonderful part of our community,
Thanks for that. And you're right, its location was very intentional. And you're right, not too long ago, it predates me, 10, 20, a dozen years ago, that portion of the Rainier Trail did not feel comfortable and welcoming. And it's been really, really cool to see that begin to change. And I think, the location of our future dog park, public art down there, all of that really creating that natural surveillance and that the positive recreational use
correct.
really makes those that want to do unsanctioned things uncomfortable.
Right.
That's what we want.
So I just, it just makes me feel proud because here you are telling somebody, to your point, Jeff, of people visiting out of town, you're almost there.
So
You're
fun.
gonna get a job. You won't be disappointed. It's really, it's just very, very positive.
It is. That's great. Well, thank you all. To you, Chris.
So next item is the reports. Jeff, do you have a director's report?
A really, really quick one, looking at time. You maybe have heard, and it was mentioned a little bit earlier, we're in the midst of budget process. That would be our 2025, 2026 next biennial budget. Interim Finance Director Andrew Snyder last Monday night gave I think, a really good overview of some of the strains and the issues that we're needing to come to grips with. She gave that update to the City Council. Gives good context. There's a variety of reasons why we are in a really hard operating budget point. As departments, we're being asked to look at reductions, looking at creative ways to either reduce or modify how we provide some services. In some cases, having to look at what some staff reductions would really look like. So hard time. I don't have details. The plan is for the mayor to present her proposed budget to City Council. The details of it probably late October. So probably at our October park board meeting, we'll be able to share with you what it might mean, what that looks like for our department. Know that much like summer, we remain committed to whatever the investment level is for investments into our parks programs and park spaces. We will be really good stewards of those investments. So more to come on budget.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. And then for my report, we're going to pass on that and we're going to move into other business. We have one, I think, fairly quick item to discuss. Nicholas Lee has respectfully resigned. He's got a new position. Now I can't remember where it is, but maybe with like City of Renton. And so he's got to shift his focus elsewhere. And Jeff and Hasanti, if you can let us all know what that means for us as a board.
Yeah, so, yes, Nicholas Lee has moved to some other work, though is excited to re-engage with the board as needed, which is always a great thing to hear from our former members. So that position actually right now is going to just stay vacant, because we have enough really great engagement from all of our members, including our alternate members, so thank you. So I had a conversation with the city clerk's office, and they felt like it made sense to sort of keep that position open through the remainder of this cycle. And then when they do the next recruitment cycle, that position will be up for a recruitment to then fill.
And if I'm not mistaken, the term was to expire next year, so it would be presented as a full. So the next recruitment is February-ish, when all the board recruitments are, and so it would be just recruiting for a full-term position. Yeah.
It might be filling for 1 year and then a full year, but
Okay.
I'll have to look.
There we go.
City clerk rules for
Trust us
new
on that.
positions are, yeah, I'll wait to see what they do, but a position will stay vacant until we do that next recruitment cycle. But if you have friends that are interested in joining the board, let them know that recruitment cycle will be starting in February. And for any of our alternates that are interested in that full-time position, we'll have a conversation closer to that recruitment cycle. And then I have one little small update for our youth members that usually come and represent for the park board. There is a lot of interest from the rest of the board to sort of offer that opportunity to more than just the two that have been coming to our meetings for the last 2 years. And so I'm actually going to their November meeting, I believe, to talk to the group about this opportunity. So potentially at our November meeting, but more likely at our January meeting, we will have some new youth advisory board members joining us for our park board.
Okay. Anyone else have any other business they'd like to discuss?
I'm seeing no's around the room, Brett.
Okay, then with that, look at that, 9:02. I will adjourn the meeting. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, all.
Thank you.